My great-grandparents, they were Mary and Cyril Maniscalco. They were immigrants that came to the United States looking for a better life. Our family goes back to the days when people was riding on the boat looking forward to America, coming here and seeing the Statue of Liberty for the first time, wondering what they were going to do with their life and how their life is going to be even better because they're here in America and they know that their children's lives is going to be better than their own. And so when our parents came and our grandparents and their parents came, it all fell in place so perfectly. It was like a domino effect because of our great-grandparents. When they came here, their life was a little bit better. They made my grandparents' life a little bit better and encouraged them to not only go forth and move forward and have a better life, but encourage their children as well to do the same so that one day, as generations passed, it will be a lot better. And hopefully, in the process, they'll remember their own roots and where they came from and the struggles and the encouragement that they had. Now, my grandparents, they were of Jim Maniscalco. He was the eldest of 4 children from Cyril and Mary Maniscalco. When they first came to America, could barely speak English. Well, of course, my grandfather, he married my grandmother, Angelina. And she was from Little Italy in Alabama. And so when they got married, they came to the Mississippi Gulf Coast because they fell in love with this area. It was beautiful. It had beautiful trees. The people were warm and friendly. And it was just so much hope and promise here. I guess that's why they call it the Promised Land. And when my grandparents decided that what they were going to do was what the friends that they had was already doing. They were role models. It was a Mexican family, and they had tamales, hot tamales at that. And my grandparents decided they wanted to learn how to make these hot tamales because they were so good, homemade from scratch. So for 25 years, my grandmother and my grandfather, Jim and Angelina, would make homemade hot tamales out of their house. It was a little wooden house down at the end of Santini Street in Biloxi. And they were very dedicated and loyal, where they would get up every morning and they would make these tamales in this little kitchen that was dedicated just for making hot tamales. And when their love that they put into these hot tamales just skyrocketed those tamales to the fame that it is today. But back then in the 40s, my grandfather had a push cart, and he sold his tamales. He'd push them from his house up to downtown Biloxi, and he had his favorite little spots. And he would park his little hot tamale cart on one of those corners, and he'd stand out there and say, hot tamales, get them while they're hot. And people would come up there and they'd line up for his hot tamales. And you got to remember, this was the days when Biloxi was hustle and bustling on Howard Avenue. The sidewalks was ringing with activity. Trolley cars were passing, bells were ringing. The great little pigeons was perched up on the beautiful buildings looking down at that hot tamale man on that corner selling hot tamales. And so for 25 years, he sold tamales, very loyal and dedicated, with a lot of love that he put into it, he and my grandmother. And so my mother, Doris, back in the early days when they were making their tamales, would help my grandparents. We'd go over to their house. And they loved my mother very much. She was not only a relative, but she was a friend. And she would go over there and she would help them roll hot tamales in their home. And by doing that, she learned the recipe. So back in the 60s, when my grandparents passed away, they never dreamed that their legacy would be carried on by their daughter-in-law, my mother, Doris. So back in 1976, Mama woke up one day and she says, you know, I've got a little baby here that I want to raise and give her something really good. So she decided to make those homemade hot tamales that she remembered making back in the early days with her in-laws, my grandparents. And she would rattle those pots and pans in the kitchen early in the morning, and she decided she's going to make those tamales, and had a little small stand built out in the front yard. It was like a box. Wasn't much to it. Even had little light bulbs hanging by strings. It was very primitive, but it worked at the time. And she had it parked out front, And people would pass by and wonder, what is this neat little building right there? I mean, it was hand-painted signs that said hot tamales, very primitive like, but really neat little things. And she started making those tamales, never dreaming in a million years that over 40 years later, we would still be there carrying on the tradition of my grandparents and my mama making tamales. My mother has been gone now for about 10 years. And after her passing, the city of D'Iberville, which has been so generous and great for us and has done so well for us and showed their appreciation, they actually had a renaming ceremony for the street that my mother has her business on. And they changed it from First Avenue to Doris Deno Avenue. And it was a grand ceremony. Everybody was there. And I know Mama would be very humbled and just beside herself with pride. I know I am, and my sister. We both have the hot tamale stand now, and we're both keeping it the same way that Mama always did, because she kept it the same way Grandpa did, even still wrapped in newspapers like he used to do. And to this day, we hear some of the finest stories from the old people back then that remember him, and how they have their own memories. And like the lady with the wedding dress, 50 years ago, she got married. She told us, and she saw the hot tamale man. She got out of the taxi cab they were riding in, grabbed her some tamales. She's eating them in the cab. She dropped one on her dress, and she says, Mr. Deno, she says, I want you to know that we pulled out that wedding dress, and that tamale stain is still there. She says, but it's a great memory. And we love stories like that, because it brings us back to that time, and it re-verifies that that time was real. And we love that because we love our culture, we love our history, and our heritage. And I know everybody has one, and if you can hold on to your past and learn about your heritage, it's like a little jewel in a treasure box that you could take out and polish, and when you do that, it'll shine forever. And that's what we do with our little hot tamale stand located in D'Iberville. On November the 2nd, shortly after Mother passed away, well, really, it was right before, because she remembered this one. The city of D'Iberville also gave her her own special day. They said November the 2nd will now be, we're going to proclaim November the 2nd to be Doris's Hot Tamale Day. That was an incredible honor, and I'm so glad Mama got to see that. But my sister Shannon and I, we're still there, and we still humbly working the hot tamale stand, because really it's not a business per se, it's a family member. And we love that little family member, and we keep her healthy and happy, and she keeps us happy too. Please come visit us, because when you do, you just don't come patronize and buy hot tamales. You visit our family, and you get to visit us and who we are. And hopefully when you leave, you'll leave with a lot more than just tamales.